we speak to people, people are willing to give the Prime Minister's credit for his handling of the Iran war and keeping the UK out of a sort of active role in that, even though obviously we've allowed our bases to be used for defensive purposes. And then if you squint slightly more on the word cloud, you get NHS in slightly smaller letters. So it's not a great legacy, but I think it goes to that point that we've spoken about a few times over Keir Starmer's premiership, that where the public do give him credit, it's stuff on the international scene.
Luke Tryl here now with us live to talk about the latest in the opinion polls. Hey, Luke.
Good evening.
Great to have you with us as always. Let's start with the state of the parties, Luke.
Yeah, well, we're in a sort of, I guess it's a sort of slightly zombie voting intention at the moment, because we know that the Prime Minister will be stepping down shortly, and Andy Burnham is likely to take over. But we're still looking at where people are in the polls. And what we found was that this week, Reform are down slightly on 28. The Conservatives are up a little bit on 22. And Labour are on 21. So a 6-point lead for Reform UK over the Conservatives, 7 points over Labour, Liberal Democrats on 12, and the Greens just entering double figures there.
Right. Now, you've got some numbers on Andy Burnham. I want to come back to that in a moment, because you've got some research on Keir Starmer, the outgoing Prime Minister, and what people think about him and what he's achieved. So from what I can see, because I'm looking at one of those cloud charts where people are questioned on the subject, and the word that keeps coming up is placed into the cloud, larger and larger depending on how often it's mentioned. Well, you tell us what's there, because it's rather upsetting for poor old Keir Starmer.
We did. So, yeah, we asked people in a word or two, what would you say have been Keir Starmer's greatest achievements as Prime Minister? And as you say, the bigger the word, the more people said it. And the biggest word, unfortunately for Keir Starmer, is nothing. But that then is followed in slightly smaller text by the Iran war and Donald Trump. And certainly from focus groups, when we speak to people, people are willing to give the Prime Minister's credit for his handling of the Iran war and keeping the UK out of a sort of active role in that, even though obviously we've allowed our bases to be used for defensive purposes. And then if you squint slightly more on the word cloud, you get NHS in slightly smaller letters. So it's not a great legacy, but I think it goes to that point that we've spoken about a few times over Keir Starmer's premiership, that where the public do give him credit, it's stuff on the international scene. Because you remember, last year he got a lot of credit for his handling of Zelensky and the Trump fallout from that Oval Office meeting. This year it's the Iran war. So certainly more on the international than on the domestic side.
So a little bit of comfort there in the early summation of Starmer's premiership as it comes to its end. But there's another cloud. How would you describe Keir Starmer? That's not much better.
It's not. The big word in the middle of that word cloud is weak. That is followed by useless and incompetent. Although then there is good. And again, to come back to weak, just to why do people say weak? Well, when we ask people in focus groups about that, it tends to be the U-turns that come up. This sense that he will say something, and then a couple of weeks he will either change his mind or be forced to change his mind, and he's just not strong enough to see something through. And I also think, he's made this virtue of not having Starmerism, of being sort of almost an anti-politics Prime Minister. I actually think that has fed into the weakness idea, because what you don't see for the public is him projecting a vision of his own. People in focus groups struggle to say what he stands for.
Right, now when we turn to Andy Burnham and the one word summation of what you think about Andy Burnham, well, it's a good deal better than Keir Starmer, that's for sure, but it's a bit of a mixed message.
It is a mixed message, and I think it shows how important the sort of first 100 days, I know that's an Americanism we've imported, but, the start of Burnham's premiership will be, because it is a mixed bag, and I think there's an opportunity to define himself. So the biggest word just is good. That's in the middle of the word cloud. I mean, most politicians don't get that. But that then is followed by ambitious and opportunist. So, not necessarily positive, but, not totally negative. That's followed by unknown. There are lots of people who don't yet have an impression of him. And then you can just see northern there as well as one of the words that comes up to describe Andy Burnham. So that has clearly cut through to lots of people. So, and there's hopeful is there, but also rubbish. So it's a much more mixed bag. And I think goes to that idea that Andy Burnham, in a way Keir Starmer couldn't given the stage he'd reached. Andy Burnham probably has an opportunity to get Labour a rehearing, and how he handles himself in his early premiership, if indeed it is him, of course, will determine that.
So talk to us now about the Burnham boost, the Burnham benefit. What at this stage of the game, at the beginning of the journey, as it were, Burnham means for Labour's prospects and appearance and perception.
Well, this is really interesting. So, as well as our standard voting intention this week, we also asked if Andy Burnham were leading the Labour Party, how would you vote? And remember, I said Labour were on 21% in our standard polling. They jump to 27%. Reform come down slightly from 28 to 26, so actually you get a Labour lead of a point. The Conservatives actually jump up a point there. That might be some sort of centrist Labour supporters moving over to the Conservatives there on 23, and both the Liberal Democrats and the Greens down. And what does that suggest? That suggests that Andy Burnham is reuniting the left bloc of politics. He's taking some of those Labour supporters who've left for the Greens and the Liberal Democrats and bringing them back into the tent, as well as taking some Reform voters as well. So he's rebuilding the coalition. That said, of course, this is hypothetical. He's not in office. He doesn't have any of the challenges that prime ministers face. But it does suggest, again, that potential for Andy Burnham to turn things around if things go well.
And he seems to be doing reasonably well among undecided voters.
Yeah, that's the really interesting. So when you look at that hypothetical voting intention, and we have what we call a Sankey chart for listeners, that basically shows how the vote flows change between one scenario, current voting intention, and voting intention with Andy Burnham leading the Labour Party. You get a big chunk of people who say don't know. They tend to be disillusioned Labour supporters who are like, I just don't know if I will. They actually go back to the Labour Party with Andy Burnham leading. So again, it suggests he's sort of, I don't know if you can call electoral groups gangs, but he's kind of getting the gang back together of Labour supporters.
Okay, a question that's been in the air, certainly I've been discussing on this show over the week. The idea, however realistically or unrealistically, that there should be a general election under the coming new Prime Minister. Views of the British public are quite interesting.
Yeah, it is. So there's lots of people saying that, well, obviously the public will demand a general election. I think the one thing you've got to weigh that against is the public are pretty tired of politics. In some ways, we're all Brenda from Bristol, who you will remember was the, oh no, not another one, when it came to, I think it was the 2017 general election there. And so what we find is when we say, does the new leader have a mandate to govern and should get on with the job? Or does the leader have no mandate and should call a general election? 37% say that they should call a general election, but actually 43%, so 6 points more, say get on with the job. And Labour, Liberal Democrat and Green supporters, majorities of them all say they should get on with the job. Conservative and Reform UK supporters, maybe unsurprisingly, say they'd like a general election.
Yeah, well, among Labour, even less surprisingly, they say let the man get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, only 23% of Labour 2024 voters say that the new leader should call a general election. 2/3 say get on with the job.
Okay, Tryl, great to talk. Let's do it again
Thank
next
you.
week. Tryl there from More in Common.